Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today what I want to do is tackle something is very difficult, and that is how do we evaluate the value of a watch? And what I did, I took the High Horology Foundation's sort of their what they call their perimeters, and there's 7 of them, and we're going to take a look at those in terms of evaluating a watch's value. And in part, this is also the company, the watch company itself. Now, there's 7 of these. There's a history and DNA, the style, design, and artistic expertise, the research and development, production and technical, distribution and after-sales service, connoisseurs and collectors, brand image and communication, and finally training. Now, starting off with the history and DNA, it's a very difficult task because it's been broken up. By the way, my watch today I'm wearing is H. Moser at Sea Henry Double Hairspring. Love that watch. Okay, so let's take a look at Patek Philippe and Chapek. These are 2 extant contemporary brands. Now, Patek Philippe started with Antony Patek and a guy named František Čapek, and they had a company for about 6 years, from 1839 to 1845. Čapek then went and started his own company in 1845, and it was around until around 1880, and then disappeared and reappeared in 2011, over 100 years later. And so when Čapek left, Antony Patek wasn't so much of a watchmaker, he was more of a watch business guy. And he partnered up with a guy named Jean-Adrien Philippe, who was a watch guy, a very talented one. And then that was where Patek Philippe came from. And when we look at the history and DNA of a watch, it's sort of like what they were up to, where they were going, and so forth. Originally, in their values, some wanted to produce a lot of watches, others wanted fine watches. And so this is the kind of thing. So when we look at a watch, we say, well, where does this one coming from? This can be very difficult. You take a newer brand, started, I think, in late 90s, 1999 or sometime like that, is F.P. Journe. Now, since then, he's won all these awards and so forth, but he likes to trace his DNA back through George Daniels to Breguet. And if you look at his designs, they reflect that. So he sort of, he didn't inherit the DNA, he had to sort of create it. And he did a heck of a job doing it. Other ones have similar kinds of history. How they use is a very interesting thing. But it's not always the best tool to evaluate the value of a watch. At least that's my opinion. Okay, the next is style, design, and artistic expertise. And this has to do with creativity, and at the same time, it has to do with the skills that have been handed down through centuries. So some of this stuff is like enameling a watch and guilloche and the whole elements of design. This particular one I have up there is from Vacheron Constantin, and it's about the art of the watch. And you can, if you have to look carefully, you can see where they have the days of the weeks, the dates, and the time. And it's something that's one of the types of watches that they have. The next one is, to me, the most important, and this is your R&D production and your technical aspect. Now, when a guy named Pascal Raffi sort of restarted Beauvais in the early 2000s, what he did, he bought and created both a manufacturing and R&D aspect of it called Demier 1738. And what he did, he provided all of these different skills together along with the resources to do the research and development and the production and take care of all of the technical aspects. So Beauvais doesn't have to go down the road and say, hey, could we get this from you and this from you? They make all of it themselves. They've got 73 people in 41 different professions. That's a lot of diversity. And so they want to do something new, they'll have the people to do it with. Other big watch companies have these same kind of facilities. In fact, Rolex, for example, forges their own metal. They're really down to the details of it. I mentioned my H. Moser. They do the same thing. They have they make it hairsprings out of niobium and titanium. These kinds of things are important. Now, the reason they're important to me is that I'm not getting some off-the-shelf thing that somebody says, oh, well, we got a whole bunch of these left over. Let's use one. We'll make a watch from it. Or they buy it from somebody else. Okay, the next is the distribution and after-sale service. This has to do with, there's some, you can go to some little outfit and some guy makes some really neat watch, but you can't get it fixed. One of my favorite watches is a Harboring 2. It's a very small little Austrian company, but if I want to, they have it all set up so that if I got a problem with it, they'll take care of it. Now, it may take a while to go back to Austria and have them fix it up and everything, but you can have that. Their distribution chain, though, is quite small. I think there are 2 places in the United States where you can get them, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. Now, on their larger ones, you have companies. The one that I have up there is a watch company, a retail watch company and jewelry store called Cellini's in New York City. They just reopened a new store, incredible place, and they service a lot of different watches, or they have the connections with it, and so some of these companies like H. Moser and Parmigiani, Lawrence Hurrier, so a number of other watches that they sell. They also provide the network, at least for the service for them. Okay, now this is important because if you have some guy, some loving hands at home making watches and you can't get them serviced, that's not a good thing. All right, this next is the Connoisseurs and Collectors. This is a really interesting thing, is that these are people who look at the watches, they compare them, they talk about them. Here there's a lot of new social media in that goes on. There's a really great YouTube show called The Watches TV with a guy named Marc-Andre Deschaux, who I admire greatly because he speaks and pronounces French so well. And in that picture, there are a couple others, one Beth Doerr and Ian Skellerin from Quill and Pad, which is an important online resource for information about watches. And so having that as part of what you do in watchmaking, and so buyers they can go there and look at it and find out about it. And so this is another aspect that's important. The next one, the brand image and communication, is basically, to me, advertising. And for a lot of people, that counts for a lot, because if somebody sees a watch and says, oh boy, yeah, that's a Rolex, or that's a Patek Philippe, or that's a Jaeger-LeCoultre. I like those watches. I like Rolexes, I like Patek Philippe, and I like Jaeger-LeCoultre, but I don't buy it because I see people at a horse show or at a polo match. I mean, how many of us play polo? Not a lot, but they look at that, they say, well, I don't know. So that brand image communication, this is one of the things they have, but that, I think, has more to do with the business end than it does the quality of the watch itself. Now, the final one is training, and this may seem, well, who cares about training? Well, if you have a watch and you buy it from a watch company, you want them to be around later on. You want to have somebody there who's going to fix your watch in the future. Sometimes this is done. There's this one guy we talked about was Thomas Ninkchist watches. Now they have this Unitas, ETA Unitas in it. Well, one thing, finding a watchmaker, watchmakers love ETA because they can get the parts and they get everything for it. And so the general training of watchmakers, of course, is important, but not specific ones. On the other hand, if I have a Rolex or I have a FP Journe, I want somebody who knows those watches to take care of it. And so that's why training is an important aspect of what they call fine watchmaking. So when we're evaluating a watch, we have to take these in consideration. So this is, I'd like to get your feedback on this, what your opinions are. It's easy to say, okay, now look, we can look at these very specific things with how good of a job did they do on the finishing, what kind of components did they use, how many do they make, do they handmade, are they machine made? All of those other things can come into it. Now this may determine how much you want to pay for it. And when we're talking about the value of a watch, sometimes it's how much they cost, but other watches are really excellent watches that are not that expensive, and some that are really expensive. So these things are things that we need to consider, and I'd like to hear your opinions about that. Also, too, this is an invitation to subscribe if you like. And until Sunday, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection.